Hello everyone, and welcome to my corner of the internet. So today I'm going to be doing something a little different. I'm going to be drawing an AU for some of my characters. And to my knowledge, an AU stands for an alternate universe. I've seen people write AUs for existing characters, like from a TV show or a movie, or for their own characters. And I don't know if I'm the only one who has noticed this, but I feel like a lot of people and companies these days are taking stories that were originally set in a different time period and retelling them by setting them in the 21st century. I have to say that most of the time I'm not a fan of that because I just don't see any real reason for it. I don't think that stories need to be set in the present day for them to be relevant to people now. People have honestly not changed at all. Unless you're looking at the political context or something, most of the themes that you're going to find in a story still apply today, just like they did when it was first written. As a bonus, if you're reading a story that's set in a different time period, you're also going to learn about some random bits of history that you probably wouldn't have thought of. And at least for me, I tend to read stories because of the setting. So unless I'm really invested in the plot or characters, I'm not going to be very interested in a remade version. I used to argue that sometimes it's not even possible to actually remove a story from its original context and transfer it to a different time period without losing important details. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that basically all of my favorite stories could be set in the 21st century, and most of the important points in the plot could still be retained, even if some of the details or themes had to be changed. So naturally, I started thinking about my own stories and what they would look like if they were set in contemporary America. Since Seppi and Ten are technically from a different time period, I added them here, but I didn't end up changing their designs too much since they're from the future, and obviously my concept of the future is based off of current fashions. I can try to guess, but I don't actually know what's coming next. So I kept both of their hairstyles the same because I know I've seen girls with space buns like this, and I've seen boys that comb their hair kind of like Ten does. I gave Zeffy clothes that look more athletic because I feel like if she lived in the early 21st century, she would definitely be interested in sports and that sort of thing. And I gave her long pants and a t-shirt because in the story she's also interested in history, which has been kind of like my personal joke because what she considers history is the early 21st century. So in the story, she actually has a set of historical clothes that she made that are long pants and a t-shirt. For some reason, bright blue and pink are the colors I've always associated with her, even though I usually draw her in green. And for Ten, I knew that he needed to have some kind of nerd joke on his t-shirt. At first, I was thinking about giving him one with a bell curve or the Dunning-Kruger effect on it, mostly because I really want a shirt with the Dunning-Kruger effect on it. But after looking around for reference photos, I found this Don't Be a Jerk t-shirt, which I thought was even better. I gave Ten a darker color scheme with green accents. Next was Moswin, so for reference photos for all these modern outfits, I basically went shopping for my characters. I obviously didn't buy anything, but I looked at a bunch of online stores to find photos of clothes that are currently being sold, so that the outfits would be somewhat plausible as something that someone in the 21st century would be wearing. I decided to draw Neferkari and Setefmat in semi-formal clothes because they always look so fancy when I draw them in their regular clothes with their makeup and their jewelry that they never seem to take off. What was sort of interesting for these characters is that I ended up taking colors that are basically just accents in the original designs and making them much more prominent. In Neferkari's original design, she has the little sun disk amulet, and sometimes when she's dressed up, she has a red belt. But for this design, I used a lot more red than that. As you can see with the blouse, I also tried to mimic the belt, and I gave her a necklace with a round gold charm at the end. It's not literally a sun disk, but I wanted to try and keep that shape language. She's the only one of my AU characters with a skirt, because I was trying to avoid forcing my own skirt-wearing habits onto my characters, but it felt right for her. I actually found the perfect shirt for Moswin because it has these ruffled sleeves that look somewhat like her original dress, and it has gold embroidery that looks reminiscent of a broad color. Sort of. I also kept with her turquoise color scheme, which complements her bright orange hair so well, with these short leggings. I don't know what you'd actually call them, but I know that I had an item of clothing just like this when I was her age. I also put her in flip-flops because in her original design she's constantly barefoot, and the outfit she's wearing looks a little more casual. For Setefmat, I knew I wanted to go with pants and some kind of blazer. Her character design has always been more masculine, like I've tried to emphasize squares and triangles instead of softer shapes. Maybe not very successfully, but I'm working on it. So I thought that giving her a blazer would be perfect because that kind of brings out the squared off shoulders. And the pants, of course, are pretty common for women these days, even though where she's from, no one wears pants. I gave her a necklace too, which is also based off of her jewelry in the original design, and of course it's triangular. The biggest liberty I took with her design was her hair. I just don't see anyone wearing an ancient Egyptian style wig in the 21st century, so I just gave her a contemporary looking bob cut. I kind of went back and forth on how I wanted her hair and Neferkari's hair to look. I'm so used to seeing both of them with basically super stiff looking hair because they're both wearing fancy wigs, but they both have naturally curly hair. And even though I'm really used to seeing Neferkari with straight hair, from a character perspective, it makes a lot more sense that she would let her hair do whatever it wants, while Sekhmet would be the one to go at her hair with a straightening iron and force it into a certain style. I wanted to kind of maintain the visual difference between these two, because, believe it or not, in the early days of my concepts for Moswen, back when it was supposed to be comedy sketches about a soda-loving time traveler, it's been so long, there was a character who was Moswen's age and was her friend and co-worker at the temple. I did write a couple scenes with this character, but I didn't love her personality or the dynamic that they had together, so I essentially just split up this character into two other characters, made them both significantly older than Moswen, and kind of accentuated the difference between their two personalities. And these two characters became Neferkari and Sekhmet, and now I love them both. Since Pebbles doesn't really wear clothes, he looks pretty much the same, but I did give him a little collar. I knew that I needed to get at least one of my ancient Egyptian dudes on here because there's definitely a huge contrast between contemporary Western men's clothing and what was considered fashionable in the ancient Mediterranean. So I thought that would be fun to try. I decided on Sekhmet because in the current iteration of the story, he is one of the major characters, and I've also put more work and agonizing into his character design than I probably should have. Of course, I took away his eye makeup, jewelry, and a fancy wig, but I did decide to give him some other props. I gave him a backpack and a book, which is kind of like a little allusion to his character and how it would translate into the 21st century. I gave him a yellow polo shirt because, as I think I've said before, yellow is the color I've assigned to him despite the fact that there is virtually no yellow in his regular character design. I gave him khaki shorts because the most popular fabric in New Kingdom Egypt was linen, and natural linen is kind of khaki colored. Honestly, I think he looks really cute, and he's one of my favorite character designs on here. My storyline for Arsenic is still very much in the early stages of development, but I knew I wanted to include my protagonist here. One thing I've decided is that she basically lives in a cabin in the woods and spends a lot of time in nature, so I wanted to give her hiking boots. I also wanted to kind of incorporate some elements of 1860s clothing into her design, and one of my favorite things about dresses from the 50s and 60s is just how much fabric there is. The skirts and sleeves are huge, and there are just so many pleats and ruffles, which I can personally attest to because I am trying to sew a 60s dress right now. But apparently, hoop skirts are no longer in style, so I decided to give her bagging jeans instead to kind of give that same feeling and also make it look like something she might be wearing while hiking around the woods. I also gave her a long-sleeve turtleneck sweater with ruffles on the ends, which I thought would kind of mimic the 60s pagoda sleeves. And for her hair, the 60s were way less crazy than the 30s and 40s, and the typical hairstyle for the decade is basically just a low bun, so that's what I gave her. The pose that she's in kind of made it look like she was looking over her shoulder at something, so I added one of her crows flying. It looks a little awkward, but that's fine. This was honestly a really fun exercise. These are already characters that I know and love, and it was really interesting to think about how their stories would change in this alternate universe. If you have any thoughts on adapting stories into different time periods, or any questions about my little AU, please feel free to leave a comment. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.